I need to read this out before we start. Welcome to this meeting of the committee. This meeting is being held remotely and also in person and will be filmed and recorded for live and subsequent broadcast available through the Council's website. The Council is a data controller under the General Data Protection Regulations and the Data Protection Act of 2018. We broadcast and record Council meetings to fulfil our public task obligation to enable members of the public to observe the democratic process. Data collected during the process will be retained in accordance with Council published policies available through the Council's website. Members of the Council are reminded that they should follow the Council's established meeting protocols, including around the use of the chat facility, and that comments made in the chat facility are visible to all participants in the meeting, which may include members of the public who have also received invites to the meeting. Thank you for that. Lizzie, can we do a roll call, please?
Apologies from Councillor Popper to Councillor Cassidy substituting. Those are apologies from Superintendent with Superintendent Laura Nixon, and there is a You're remembered to roll call. The following members please indicate if they are present at the meeting either in person or remotely. Councillor Brennan. Councillor Cassidy.
Present in the chamber.
Councillor Crowther. Councillor Crowther.
Attending remotely.
Councillor Paisley.
Present in the chamber.
Councillor Law.
Present remotely.
Councillor Maguire.
Present remotely.
Robson Kenzie.
In the chamber.
Councillor Moran.
In the chamber.
Councillor Quinn.
Present remotely.
Councillor Reynolds.
Present remotely.
Councillor Wilson.
Present in the chamber.
Councillor Brennan. Are there any declarations of interest?
Okay. Right. Good afternoon again. We have guests with us today from the police and the fire service. From the fire service, we have Area Commander David McGarry and the Group Commander Paul Story. They're online. Within the chamber from the police, we have Chief Inspector Damien Kane and Superintendent Laura Gibson, who's representing Superintendent Laura Waddle. We also have from the giving us a presentation on violence against women and girls strategy. We have Temporary Detective Superintendent Mark McLennan and Temporary Detective Sergeant Amanda Cairns. With your permission, colleagues, I would like to take the presentation on violence against women and girls strategy first. Is that okay?
Agreed.
Thank you.
Agreed.
Can I hand over to Acting Chief Superintendent?
Thank you, Convener. Thank you, Councillors. I'd like to just start with briefly acknowledging the statement by the Chief Constable this morning round about institutional discrimination in Police Scotland. I know Superintendent Gibson will come on to a wee bit more on that later on, but just to acknowledge it first of all, it's obviously very fresh for ourselves as an organisation, and we're still digesting that in terms of coming to terms with some of the emotions across the organisation, some of the difficult conversations that will no doubt follow, but I just wanted to acknowledge that first of all. I'll come on to some of the local perspective on violence against women and girls just shortly, but I'd like to first just invite DS Amanda Cairns, who's from our National Policy Unit, the Domestic Abuse Coordination Unit, who's just going to give you a brief presentation round about our violence against women and girls strategy, which is quite a recent document. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Amanda Cairns, and as I've already been introduced, I work at the Domestic Abuse Coordination Unit, which is the policy unit based at Specialist Crime Division at Kilmarnock. So just for a brief overview on the violence against women and girls strategy, it includes wider aspects of public protection in Scotland, and it's not easy to define. It encompasses a breadth of complex policing issues, covering criminality, vulnerability and protection. Public protection business area arguably presents the single biggest risk to both communities we serve and our organisation. Specialist Crime Division Public Protection business area works across several disciplines, and they're all aimed at protecting people at risk of harm. This includes developing and reviewing and driving national policy in a number of areas, and those areas include domestic abuse, forced marriage, honour-based abuse, stalking and harassment. We've got rape and sexual crime, prostitution, child and adult protection, sex offender policing, and human trafficking and exploitation. Our policing response has changed significantly over the last 30 years with regards to public protection, but there's much more that can be done. Could I have slide 2, please? Thank you. So, tackling violence against women and girls is not a new concept for policing, but we recognise that a bespoke violence against women and girls strategy was necessary. And although our response to crime has evolved and there's been changes in society, it's not finished, but there is less tolerance of violence against women and girls, particularly in relation to domestic abuse. We can't police our way out of this, and we recognise that policing in isolation isn't the answer. There's been a cultural change in policing. It's been slow, but there has been a change, and there's been changes in attitude, both within policing and within our communities. We've seen a shift in where criminality and vulnerability exists. We recognise that violence against women and girls exists in public and private and virtual spaces, and that brings challenges to policing. Our strategy, insight and engagement in public protection teams undertook a significant amount of research and engagement activity to develop a VOG strategy that meets the needs of victims and their survivors and reflects the unique role policing has to play in tackling violence against women and girls. And it included strategic engagement forums, which met quarterly, and also academic challenge sessions, but also, crucially, public engagement platforms were set up to capture the lived experience, and we embedded that in our strategy. The strategy is part of Police Scotland's strategic planning framework, and it aligns to a joint strategy in policing. And up there on the slides, you can see the 4 outcomes. We've got supporting women and girls, preventing harm and securing justice, creating safe spaces, and trust and confidence. The strategy aims to drive change through the development of effective prevention strategies, the pursuit of perpetrators, and creation of safe spaces where everybody can live freely and safely. The strategy was launched, and the implementation is going to require a whole service approach for oversight, and to measure success, it will be captured within our implementation plan. Could I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So as a service, we're very much person-centred and trauma-informed in our approach, with a focus on targeting those perpetrators who present a risk of harm. Partnership working is crucial across public protection, and it's not just our statutory partners of social work, health, education. We've also got our non-statutory partners such as Assist, Women's Aid, many more. We work closely also with our colleagues in the Crown Office and Procurator Fiscal Service, and we engage with them early on our complex and protracted inquiries that we've got to ensure joint victim strategies. We've got national and local structures across public protection. Following the formation of Police Scotland in 2013, we've got 13 local policing divisions, and they're supported by national functions. We've got various governance forums and at strategic and operational levels. But there's been no national review of public protection, and it's crucial to deal with emerging risks and trends and public expectations. Seen and unseen and hidden demand is a challenge in response to all these factors, and we're currently undertaking a public protection development programme. This is the first holistic review that Police Scotland's taken in response to public protection since its inception in 2013. And we're looking at the structures, people, skills, partnerships, systems, all processes, the seen and the hidden demand, and the programme is very much underway. Our violence against women and girls implementation plan will continue to be updated and reviewed as the Public Protection Development Programme progresses.
Thanks, Amanda. I can maybe just give a brief overview of the local processes that we have here in Inverclyde. Much of that falls under the national structure, as Amanda has already given an overview, but there are some national processes which we adapt here and obviously with a local focus, and I'll just talk you through some of those that we do, in particular around safeguarding vulnerable women who are at risk of violence against women and girls, and also targeting those that seek to exploit them as well. So on the victim side, we have the multi-agency risk assessment conferences, which by its nature, multi-agency involves a number of partners who discuss women generally, but victims of, which we know as gender-based violence, victims of domestic abuse, who are identified as being high risk and in need of additional support. Partners will share relevant information around about those victims and will agree actions to support them, often supporting them away from difficult relationships and providing them with support to either report incidents to the police or to be able to move on with their life. In terms of the perpetrator strategy, a lot of that comes through the multi-agency tasking and coordinating, which again, multi-agencies are say, but that seeks to identify the highest tariff offenders, often who have offended against a number of previous partners, and to identify them and use the full range of policing tactics available at their disposal to target them and hopefully put them before the courts and also prevent them from engaging in similar behaviour in the future. Lastly, we have the disclosure scheme for Domestic Abuse Scotland, which we use on a daily basis. This involves identifying perpetrators of generally domestic abuse who are in a new relationship and will make a disclosure to their new partners, which will allow that partner to make an informed decision around about whether to continue that relationship or not, based on their knowledge now of their partner's offending history. I should say that we use this, and the awareness of this has grown quite substantially over the past few years. We've seen quite an increase in demand for these services, and in particular the disclosure scheme has really exponentially grown over the past few years, I think through a greater awareness through policing ourselves and our partners, but also through the public as well, who can ask for a disclosure to be made based on their right to ask about a potential abusive partner's past. So those are all national processes that we use day to day in Renfrewshire and Inverclyde. We also have, which is unique to Renfrewshire and Inverclyde as well, as the Vulnerable Young Persons Group, which is primarily targeted at identifying young people under the age of 18 who may be at risk of child sexual exploitation or who are the subject of frequent missing episodes. And again, what we do there is we meet monthly with partners to discuss young people where there might be indicators of child sexual abuse. We'll discuss information sharing around about that, and we'll agree actions to not only protect and safeguard that young person, but to target those who might be seeking to cause them harm or exploit them. So that's just a brief overview of some of the local processes. Obviously, Amanda's covered the national side, and I'm keen to take any questions or comments.
Could I ask, just to start things, Matt, what size of a team do you have in Renfrewshire and Inverclyde? So
in my previous role, I was Detective Chief Inspector for Public Protection in Renfrewshire and Inverclyde, and we have approximately 75 staff based at Osprey House in Paisley who cover the whole division. And they've got responsibility for the range of public protection arrangements, which is investigation of rape and serious sexual crime, child protection, domestic abuse, and the policing of sex offenders.
That was in your previous role?
Yes.
What about this role?
No, it's the same. So I now cover crime and public protection, but that's the public protection arrangements.
Thanks for that. Colleagues, any questions? Councillor Moran.
I give you thank you, Mark, and thank you, Amanda, for the presentation. Down in Inverclyde, a lot of ways we were kind of isolated, but we're finding more and more people come here to live now, and there's different aspects of life is changing for us. My question would be, maybe a bit of advice, is that if you see something you don't think is right, you know, if it is a young person's in here or a female person who's in a flat round the corner and there seems to be a lot of activity there, would it be right and proper to contact you and ask you to investigate that, or would there be another avenue we'd have to take first before we actually contacted yourselves?
No, I would invite anyone with any concerns to contact us. We can make that assessment or develop that if it's just intelligence in the first instance that we can then look at. We can record it. We can look at speaking to people who've got in confidence as well if they want to make that report, so they don't have to give their details. They can give that in confidence. We'll investigate it. We'll make an assessment of it. It might be the case there's nothing to it, in which case that's fine. We'll acknowledge the report, but if there is something to investigate, we'll certainly take that forward.
I thank you for that, because it's good to know you would be able to do that without any repercussions or wasting police time or something like that. So thank you.
Sure.
Councillor Brennan, I see your hand up.
Thanks very much. Sorry, I'm sort of stuck somewhere trying to keep logged on. So thanks so much for getting that update as chair, Councillor Wilson. Thanks very much to the people who gave it there. That was great to hear. I think if I've picked it up sort of correctly, the thrust of it was really what we're doing in response to existing criminal activity. And I'm just wondering if yourselves as the police see a role in terms of prevention, and I'm thinking particularly in response to young people and maybe sort of like increasing prevalence of sort of misogynistic attitudes. And we've heard briefings here before about online crime, and I'm just wondering, is there a role for the police in terms of that sort of prevention and education? And also, what are you doing if that is indeed part of your job, and what more do you think we as the sort of council and community could possibly be doing to tackle things like that? Thanks very much.
Thanks. Yeah, so clearly prevention's a major aspect of that in terms of raising awareness, particularly around about some of the risks that are involved. And there's a number of national projects that Amanda's team lead on as well, around about awareness raising, and you'll see a lot of that, particularly on our social media channels, around about particular campaigns at certain times of the year. For example, stalking and harassment, child sexual exploitation, some of the indicators of that, human trafficking, and what people can do to recognise the signs of that quite early and report it in, and how we can then respond to that. So you should be aware of quite a lot of online activity in terms of that awareness raising. I know that there's a couple of schemes under development at the moment in terms of delivery to schools, which is in the early infancy of trying to look at, I think it's called You, Me Together, which is round about targeting young people between the age of 12 and 18 to discuss domestic abuse, safe relationships, consent in those relationships, and also some of the danger signs that might flag up early on. So while that's still in the early stages of development, it is likely to come our way, but there's lots of prevention activity on the go at the moment.
Thanks very much. That's great. I think sometimes in terms of online campaigns, like I realise like some of us might not necessarily see them because we're not the target group or the target audience, but that's great to hear that there's a lot going on there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Lynn Quinn.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. Yeah, I'm getting a bit of echo there. Apologies. I think that seems fine now. Yeah, so is it just me? It's getting the echo. Is everyone getting an echo?
No, you're okay.
Okay, great, thanks. Yeah, so thank you very much for that presentation. I just echo what Francesca said there. It's great that we're highlighting this really important issue today. It's just, I think you mentioned in your opening statement, it's really unfortunate timing probably that that statement's been made this morning from the Chief Constable. So really I've got a question. I mean, I see in the plan, which is great, is about trust and confidence in our police, and I think that's key for a lot of women and girls to come forward. That needs to be key. So really my question is, I know it is probably early days, but will this plan be reviewed, and will there be any actions in this plan reviewed in light of the recent statement? Thanks.
So the plan's a long-term plan for Police Scotland moving forward, and I think it's also part of the Policing Together scheme to look at the wider issues of equality, diversity and inclusion throughout Police Scotland. But you're right about the point in trust and confidence, and clearly this plan, the Violence Against Women and Girls strategy, is a longer-term plan moving forward. It's been in development for some period of time. And a lot of it isn't new. A lot of it's existing processes that have been underway for some time, but they've been included in this one document, one strategy document for the first time, so that they're all in the one place and they're accessible at one point. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, thanks. Probably another ask for you, David, as convener. Obviously, we do get an update normally in the council report on the board meeting. I just think maybe a wee bit extra attention might be needed for our next meetings review. Maybe a statement from Police Scotland, our local police, in terms of that announcement today, just to put the public's mind, you know, and put that to rest the concerns. Thanks.
I shall. The officers heard you, Lynn. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I ask you a question about human trafficking?
Sure.
That's not something we hear much about in Inverclyde. Is it prevalent in Renfrewshire and Inverclyde?
So our rates of human trafficking recording are very low in Inverclyde, but there's no such thing as a typical victim of human trafficking. So it's not that we're seeing particular trends of it. Often what we see in the west of Scotland will be a number of reports of where what's quite common is we'll see trafficking victims who will come here who've been trafficked in other parts of the world or other parts of the UK and maybe settle here. But we're seeing less prevalent patterns of anyone being a victim of trafficking that's taken place in Inverclyde. So rare, I would say. So
we're safe from that at the moment.
Well, one thing we do know is it's particularly underreported crime. So like much of the other aspects of violence against women and girls is that it is hugely underreported, and the comment earlier about trust and confidence is something we're really trying to drive in terms of having that confidence to report and having that reassurance that when someone does report an incident like that we'll deal with it effectively. So we accept that there's not a great deal of it recorded at the moment, but we do know it's underreported.
Thank you for that. Are there any more questions for the two officers? Mark and Amanda, thank you very much for coming along today. We appreciate it. We like to one of these sessions at all our meetings, and they're going down very well. So thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Lindsay, could you see our guests to the lift, please? What? Yes, oh yes, yes. Interesting. Thank you very much, colleagues. We now move on to the Police Performance Scotland Performance Report. We have got Superintendent Lorna Gibson, who's standing in for Chief Superintendent Laura Waddle. Are you doing that in conjunction with Chief Inspector Kane? The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So firstly, probably just introduce myself to those members of the board that don't know me. So I'm the Partnership Superintendent for Renfrewshire, Inverclyde, Western Bartonshire and Argyll and Bute. So I'm based between Paisley and Dumbarton largely. I'm usually responsible for attending multi-agency kind of partnership meetings, including Alcohol and Drugs Partnership, Community Justice Partnership, Community Safety Partnership, on occasion Alliance Board, and many other partnership meetings as well. So I've got good links in with those meetings and those partners within the local authority area. And there's going to be an establishment of a small team underneath me over the coming months, which will allow me to focus more on preventions and interventions, which hopefully Inverclyde will see some benefit from as well in terms of reducing demand on frontline services and preventing people becoming victims of crime. So before I pass over to Chief Inspector Kane, just to speak about the scrutiny report, and just to address Councillor Quinn's kind of question there, I just want to take the opportunity to speak briefly about the media coverage that Police Scotland received this morning, obviously in the back of the Chief Constable's statement to the SPA. So you'll be aware that the Chief attended the SPA board this morning and publicly addressed the matter of institutional discrimination. This is likely to be a much reported, debated and speculated on announcement that he's made, and there will be media and wider kind of public coverage about that in society, I dare say as well. probably in Scotland and further afield. The Chief Constable recognises that the organisation needs to do more to build a service where people are not disadvantaged because of their ethnicity, sex or anything else which makes them who they are, i.e. a protected characteristic. So acknowledging institutional racism is a recognition that discrimination persists because organisations don't do enough to establish processes, procedures, systems and education to prevent it and to advance equal opportunities. There is no suggestion that the significant majority of Police Scotland staff and officers are in any way racist, sexist or misogynistic. It's very much an organisational announcement. So recognising institutional discrimination exists within Police Scotland is necessary so we can identify and address any bias where it occurs and build an inclusive, anti-racist and anti-discriminatory service which is inclusive and diverse going forward. Sexism, misogyny, racism, discrimination and hate persist and exist in all sectors and organisations and across society as a whole, and policing isn't immune to this. We have a moral and legal duty to live up to our own standards and values and to earn the trust of our fellow citizens. Acknowledging challenges so we can address them is a moral and legal duty and operationally necessary for Police Scotland. The service already have rigorous recruitment, vetting and prevention and conduct measures in place, and our vigilance around these matters has never been higher or stronger. We also have the Policing Together programme, which is led by the Chief Constable, the DCC and ACC. It's a 10-month programme which focuses on our 10 standards of professional behaviour, and it's a whole service effort to ensure that our values of integrity, fairness and respect and upholding human rights lie at the heart of all that we do. I hope that kind of addresses that announcement this morning. As Mark said, you know, it's new to us as well. It's only announced a few hours ago and we're still kind of coming to terms with it ourselves in terms of an organisation. But if there's anything else, I'm happy to answer. Otherwise, I'll pass over to Damien to the scrutiny report.
No, thanks for that, Lorna. I think that we'll leave that until after Damien's report. And then I'm sure if my colleagues have any questions for you regarding the announcement this morning, you're quite happy to answer them.
I'll certainly do my best. As I say, it's only a few hours old and we're still certainly trying to...
Yes, we know it's hot,
yes.
It's hot off the press,
Yes.
and you just happen to be here. Chief Inspector.
Thanks, Convener. First thing I'll mention is, as you know, there's a slight change to the reporting mechanism. The last few boards we've had, there's been a bit of consternation about the figures being conflated with the lockdown period because we used the 5-year average. So, given the feedback for the board, Chief Superintendent will ask us to change. So, you'll see there's a significant difference in some of the figures. That's because the figures we have in this document are probably more accurate because they're referring to the similar period last year, which should give you a better idea of increases and decreases in crime. So, just to get that point out of the way, so there's a lot in the report. It's covering a long period of time from the 1st April last year through the 28th of February. So picking out the highlights from page 1, one of the most striking things you'll see is the dishonesty crimes are up 14.6%. And further on in the report, you'll see detection rate sits at just under 48%. So to give you a kind of summary of what that entails and what we've been doing about these crimes over the piece, 44% of all the cyber crimes, and I know you had the cyber input a number of months back, and there's some challenges around detecting these. 44% of cyber crimes are acquisitive. In other words, we're suffering across the globe, but likewise here in Inverclyde with a lot of online frauds. It was brought up once before by one of the members on the board as an issue with cost of living, is that impacting an acquisitive crime. So we've done a recent assessment between February and March, and basically yes is the short answer. So some of the findings we had over the course of, we compared data over the last few years when the cost of living increases took place, and examples are shoplifting has increased 12% in the previous year. There's been theft of foodstuffs has increased 34%, which I think that was maybe a point you'd asked us to clarify previously, and common theft in itself is up by a fifth. So there's significant increases in kind of lower grade crimes, but one of the other things that some of the members might pick up on the bottom right of the front page, which is probably more startling, is the increase in housebreaking. So again, to clarify, housebreaking is a term using Scottish law that's somewhat misleading. It will often mean a dwelling house is broken into, but it also can mean a shed, or it can mean a business premise, somewhere that's not occupied or residential. is broken into for the purpose of committing crime. So in terms of the housebreakings, sadly a significant number of these are residential premises, but an increasing number between about November and the end of December last year during the reporting period involved a number of business premises. I touched on this lightly the last report, but just to give you a bit more context on that, there was one individual in particular was locked up for a spate of 14 commercial housebreakings, and since that incarceration, which I think occurred around about the end of December, there's been a noticeable decrease, which obviously points the finger of blame, in my opinion, it was likely to be the individual we had locked up. We've made some inquiries with the courts recently. He was due for release in the last 4 weeks, and due to other cases put forward, that's not going to happen. So we're hopeful that intervention is going to continue with the decrease in commercial housebreakings. Sadly, one other thing we picked up, and this is more into January, February this year, which again is in the reporting period. You'll notice there's a spate of increased vehicle crime, which has actually been up 23% quite considerably. So in context, this was an increase not just linked to Inverclyde, but it involved a lot of Inverclyde nominals. It was happening elsewhere, and we pooled resources between ourselves, Glasgow divisions and elsewhere, and it transpired we assessed where individuals from Inverclyde committing vehicle crime here, but also committing crimes elsewhere and bringing their stolen vehicles to this area. So with a multifaceted approach between uniform, CID, proactive plainclothes teams, and ultimately led to a several month-long operation, which resulted in 4 males being arrested just at the end of last month, after a number of search warrants were executed on the Inverclyde area, which led to 4 males being arrested for a total of 31 charges, and that's predominantly to do with thefts of vehicles. With significant recoveries of vehicles, we recovered 1 point, we were recovering almost a vehicle a day in different areas in Greenock, and that was due to diligent work with some of the local cops, using local knowledge, doing a lot of enhanced checks in vehicles that looked out of place. We managed to return a lot of these vehicles to the owners or to the insurance companies. So we put a big dent in that organised criminality, and it was organised, it wasn't randomised, it was teams of people who were well equipped and working out to steal high-end vehicles across different parts of the West. So more recently, and probably just towards the end of this reporting period, but it's becoming a current issue. You've maybe heard of the trend of thefts of catalytic converters. I only bring it up, it's not really relevant to the stats in the report, but it's just for awareness. It's been quite prevalent in London mainly and other parts of the UK, something we haven't suffered with in Inverclyde, but recently we've had a couple, and I do mean literally a couple, of reports of catalytic converters, and I only mention it because I know obviously we ourselves as elected members, it's a message you can push out. As you know, when we target one area of criminality, it tends to displace it to others. Could be the case that this is just this form of crime evolving. There's certain simple safeguards can be put in place to prevent your car being targeted for catalytic converters. And I would urge anybody who uses social media, tries to link into the Roundshire Inverclyde page, we do put out anything that's current and up to date within the last 24 hours. We usually try and get the most up to date crime prevention advice and push it out that way. So I'd appreciate if that was possible for partner agencies and yourselves to push that message to your constituents. So other things, violence is up 2%, not a huge increase, but I thought it would be appropriate to speak to DI Nikki Wake. She's the Detective Inspector that took on the role from David Wagstaff a number of months ago. She's the lead for CID in this area. Part of the violence, no reason I bring up the number, 2% is quite small, but being honest, some of the violence is quite serious violence, so I think it's relevant that we're quite transparent and brief in this. There's been a significant increase in serious violence, not linked just to ongoing serious major incidents that you're aware of, that I've discussed previously. But we've had a spike over probably the last 5 or 6 months within the reporting period, in particular in terms of robberies. Unfortunately, Inverclyde's always suffered with robberies. It generally tends to be street robberies of individuals. But we had a noticeable spike in armed robberies, usually with knives, machetes of shops, newsagents. It was generally Greenock and Port Glasgow suffered from this. Again, similar to the venture we put in place for vehicle crime, with a real focus on that, led by CID and with uniform support. So there had been, over the reporting period, there's a total of 31 detected robberies, and that includes 5 shops that were robbed. So that means people have been identified, arrested, put before the court. Some are in custody, some have been released. Those that have been released are robustly managed by ourselves in terms of any release conditions. But there is also an element of that some of the crimes have not been detected as yet. We've got 15 at the moment that we're still working on. Now, of that 15, 2 of them are shops. There's a variety of reasons why we're unable to detect these. The sad truth is some of them, we have victims who choose not to cooperate, we have uncooperative witnesses, and again, it's something I say openly in this forum, without naming names, is to try and encourage people. We can't do much to help them, and we can't stop these events taking place if we don't get cooperation of the public. If police weren't there to witness what took place, we need witness evidence to target the offenders. But I have an assurance that 7 of these undetected crimes are still ongoing, and a number of these are likely to be detected and see arrest in the coming weeks. Finally, maybe going off the stats slightly, I just thought it would be relevant to highlight what I've picked up as area commander here for now 6 months. Some of the, probably 2 of the most recent concerns, aside from what I've raised, if you indulge me, convener. One has been, as you'll see in different pages of the report, there's reference to acquisitive crime increases, cyber crime. In a nutshell, one of the biggest areas that's actually increasing, and it's a difficult area to target.
Well, what page are you on, Chief Inspector?
It's actually split through. I'll try
right,
and
okay.
give you a summary, convener. Basically, what we're finding, and
You're condensing it for us.
I'm going to condense it, simplify it if I can. Fraud activity is becoming a growing area of business globally. Inverclyde is no different. But sadly, what we're finding, I think everyone in this room has probably had text messages or emails that you can quite see are frauds due to the misspells, a number of red flags, and we seem to tolerate that as just part of daily business, living with social media and the internet. Unfortunately, some people in society are less well versed in identifying these, and it's through no fault of their own, and unfortunately these people are being increasingly targeted locally. So the reason I bring this up, I'd like to use this forum with your permission to try and highlight a very specific MO, and it's not something I would usually do, but I think it's relevant because we're finding a number of people across the country, but recently in Port Glasgow, 3 occasions this year alone, elderly people are being targeted by phone initially by people, quite advanced frauds, where they're purporting to be either police officers or fraud teams working for banks. And what they do is they target the individual, they seem to have a significant amount of data regarding who that person is. They convince the person that they're recruiting them to assist in identifying staff members at the local branch of the bank who may be involved in stealing funds. And basically the MO is effectively to convince the person to uplift thousands of pounds from the bank, lie to the staff to subvert any attempts by the staff, the banking protocols to avoid people becoming victims. And more worryingly, they then send individuals direct to the person's home address, wherever you pick the money up. So we've had 1 this week, we've, let's say 3 this year, we've had success in, or the people themselves, I should say, we shouldn't take credit, have picked up on this, and family members have intervened on a couple of occasions, but at least 1 individual has lost a 4-figure sum, which is subject to investigation. So what we'd do is, if I could use this forum, I would encourage that this message gets out. We're trying to reach further afield. We're aware that social media is easy, cheap and wide-reaching, and it's free, but we also realise that some members of the community maybe don't pick up on social media. So we're trying to target that specific target audience, and we'll be linking in with the local authority and housing agency, the RSLs, to try and get the message out to older people across Inverclyde, and we've already been given tacit support from the council and from the housing agency, so that's a work in progress. Second issue that is linked, we've had the shutout scammers inputs given across Inverclyde, including the Oak Mall, which is basically designed to try and stop people becoming victims of scams. And one final point in frauds is, and this is more the younger generation, sadly another tactic being used is using social media apps. I won't name which individual ones, but all manner of social media apps purporting to be persons looking to exchange intimate images. Intimate images are shared by the victim, and then they're defrauded and extorted if you don't pay a set amount of money, which is generally hundreds if not thousands of pounds. We'll share that with your family and friends, put it on the internet. So we're having some success, and I'm encouraged with the fact that some people are coming to us and telling us this, because it's not an easy thing to do. I believe, like Mark said about other crimes, it's well underreported. I would encourage people to come forward and let us know about the scale of this crime and let us try and investigate. But I'd also push the crime prevention messaging that I would urge strongly, seriously consider what you share in any format, any digital image you share whatsoever, any data, photograph, picture, any personal detail. Once it goes online, it's there for good, and you can't do anything about it very easily. The final point, and I'll stop talking after this, you'll be pleased to hear, is you'll notice in the report, same as I discussed the last time, there's still a significant number of drug deaths across Inverclyde. It's something that each police and ADP and other agencies are working on. I won't go into the details of the last time, but I just think it's key to mention. You'll see in the report that, as I mentioned, in the naloxone rollout, which is part of the police response, is showing that 40% of cops, and by that I mean constable, sergeant, inspectors, have been given naloxone. I checked that this morning. We've actually pushed on quite well. We're actually at nearly 70% of local cops who are operational are carrying naloxone. That's only one aspect of the issue. You'll see that there's a lot of drug enforcement work, which I won't go into the figures unless you need clarity on, but suffice to say, you have my ongoing commitment. We're still targeting drug dealers, executing warrants day after day. And you'll see at the back of the report, which I think is page 11, I mentioned the proactive response to acquisitive vehicle crime, which I've outlined already. You'll see in the drug dealing section, the second paragraph, recently after a 4 months covert operation, locked up 14 people involved in drug supply offences and made substantial seizure of drugs. But the work isn't done because unfortunately the drug deaths still continue. So again, I'll just also use this forum if I can to push the message that, as I've said before, most of the drug deaths are not caused by any one individual drug type. It's still polydrug use, and by that I mean a multitude of drugs taken at once. And despite what you might read online, there is no safe way of taking controlled drugs. There's actually no safe way of taking prescribed drugs in quantities that are not prescribed to you. So I'll just also try and push that message out a bit further, if possible. I'm happy to take any questions, Convener, if you have any.
Thank you very much, Chief Inspector. Councillor Daisley, welcome to the committee.
Thanks. Wrong basis.
You're usually online.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. Thanks for pointing that out. Thank you for both updates there. That was really informative. I've got a question around, specifically around drug deaths, actually. So it's a good segue in. And my question is, got a bit of a preamble first. So, according to recent reports to the Scottish Government from Inverclyde, there's around 650 people who are being treated at the moment for opioid substitute therapy. So that's a really significant number. Now, I know that the feeling seems to be at the moment that heroin is being superseded by another substance as the biggest issue in terms of drugs in Inverclyde. But that number, that 650, would signify to me that there's still a challenge around opioids in Inverclyde. Now, if you look online, there's a number of reports and they are conflicting, so I'm not 100% sure on this, but there's a risk of massive disruption in worldwide heroin supply, which could increase the risk of drug users replacing heroin with synthetic opioids, like fentanyl, which are up to 100 to 200 times more potent than heroin, therefore more lethal than heroin as well. So my question is, given Inverclyde is an area of high drugs deaths already, and we've seen an increase this year again, do you think that we could be at risk of an influx of synthetic opioids, and what could police do to mitigate that risk?
Chief Inspector.
Thanks, Councillor. Yeah, I know exactly the direction you're going. So if you look further afield, if you look across to the US, they suffer significantly with fentanyl. The reason we know that is Scottish cops, because what happens in other countries has a risk of translating over here. It doesn't always happen though. We do know there's been issues with a number of drug types. We get releases quite periodically. Superintendent Gibbs will sit in your local ADP, and one thing we do very well is the police and the ADP share information. So any risk of any new trends are brought up, not just at monthly meetings, but in real time. So we're always ahead of the game. We always plan for contingencies. I think, to understand your question, your concern is, should there be a change in the sort of drugs being used that present a new risk? How do we deal with that? How do we get ahead of it? The truth is, drug types and trends are changing all the time. When I worked here 8-9 years ago, I would come to different boards, and at the time we were getting an influx of Vatizolam, which at the time I'd never heard of. It was based on a kind of stronger form of Valium, and we did that very quickly to that. So there's a number of ways we could do it, and one way we react to any crime type, regardless of whether it's a drug offence or not, we look at various actions. So one would be enforcement. What can we do with enforcement? The drug activity we have is full on. We can react to drugs intelligence in a matter of hours and get a warrant and go through a door if we have to. We have prevention. What can we do? Mainly that's going to be messaging. We will do that through our own routes, but what we find is the messaging coming from health and ADP and specialists in that field usually carry more weight, frankly, than the police, because it's saying if we give the message, we're just saying no because it's illegal. Whereas health colleagues and local authority colleagues and elected members like yourself, you're doing that because it's the right thing to do. And frankly, in my experience, people pay more attention. So we're quite strong in joint messaging, but we do think health is a place to give that safety messaging out. So the other one's intelligence. So what we would do is we would encourage anyone with information in this room or elsewhere, feed it into police and ADP so we can react to trends and we can get specific messaging out. So like the messaging I gave out today, specific to those sorts of crimes, we can hear our response to the public, to drug users themselves. We might not actually be aware of the fact that the drugs they are taking are 10, 100, 1,000 times stronger. So the key thing is be realistic. We can't just tell folk don't take drugs. It doesn't work. What we can do is brief people who may take drugs themselves so that they're acutely aware your tolerance to this drug might not be the same as the last one. And the final one is communication. And we need to get the message out. When these things are happening, we have to be realistic. People, regardless of what we all do, will continue to take drugs. We can signpost others away from it. We can do prevention work in schools with adults, but the truth is some people will choose to take these. What I will say is, what I think some of the drugs you're referring to, we do in this area alone. We're already starting to see there are certain drug types that were unknown a year ago are now become prevalent in drug deaths. But to be clear, it's usually one of many drugs involved in a drug death. But I think you're right to be concerned. I'm not seeing the intelligence at present that that's imminent. I'm not saying it's something we need to prepare for now, but I think you're right to raise it. I think it's something we should collectively be alert to, and if we see the warning signs approaching, we react accordingly. Hope that answers your question.
Yep, it does. Thanks, Chief Inspector.
Okay with that, James?
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for that. Yes, Chief Inspector. No, Chief Superintendent.
Oh, yes, you've overpromoted me, Superintendent.
Superintendent.
Thank you, though. Councillor, if I could just maybe come in there as well, just to give you a bit of reassurance around the links in the Alcohol and Drug Partnership locally. So I sit on the Alcohol and Drugs Partnership, and there's really good links in there regularly, as Chief Inspector Kane said, out with regular meetings as well. So if there's a drug trend coming to the fore, I become aware of, and as I said at the start of the meeting, I cover 4 local authority areas, so I get quite good oversight of maybe issues that are starting to occur in other local authority areas. Then I will put that out to the 4 alcohol and drug partnerships I sit on. As well as that, we've got a national unit to keep an eye on any drug trends that are emerging. And I also, quite often, some of the information comes the other way from the Alcohol and Drugs Partnership and from addiction services who are, they're dealing on a daily basis with people who use drugs. And quite often some of the information comes from those individuals as well, because they've heard, through their own contacts and the medical concerns that they then raise through addiction services. So it's very much a two-way street. And if we start to see, we do monitor drugs-related deaths on a very regular basis daily, they're reviewed. And if there's a bit of a cluster or a bit of a pattern emerging, then we will absolutely do a bit more work round about that to establish if there's any commonality, if there's any links. So any trends in terms of that kind of aspect that you're speaking about of new drugs coming into the area should be picked up on very quickly. The biggest delay is probably getting those forensic results and toxicology results back to see what has been actually consumed if there's been a drug death. But if there's any substance present at drug death, then we'll seize that as well and try and test that and see if it's more potent or has got anything else in it that we've not been previously aware of. So I hope that gives you some reassurance that there are really good relationships in place locally.
Yes, thanks very much. That's it. Thanks, Lonnie.
Thanks, Lorna, for that. Councillor Crowther.
Thank you, Convener. It probably comes as no surprise that my question really relates to the drugs, and in this instance it's the supply chain. What I have noticed is that Renfrewshire and Inverclyde Division has recorded the highest rate of drug supply crime per 10,000 of population, which is the highest of any police division in Scotland. Whilst it is recognised that Inverclyde appears to be on the wrong side of collated data, this is usually interpreted as Inverclyde being amongst the highest rate of involvement in the illegal drugs trade. However, noting that this is a local police priority outcome, are these figures not more indicative of Renfrewshire and Inverclyde Division having a more robust intelligence on individuals supplied in the illegal drug trade? And the message to those individuals is that if you wish to supply drugs in Inverclyde, there is a greater likelihood that you will be identified and apprehended.
Lorna, Damien, who's taking that? Damien, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. You make a good point. So you're right, and I read that there's 2 aspects to that comment, and it is accurate. It came from the analysts. So one part is, when you first read it, you think that's no cause for celebration. Is that saying there's a significant issue in Inverclyde? Well, the truth is, I've been a cop here a long time. There is an issue with drugs here, but you're also bang on the money with your second point. These figures wouldn't exist if it wasn't for enforcement action. The enforcement action wouldn't take place if we didn't have people feeding us information and intelligence, if we weren't getting partners and other agencies and the public mainly giving us information to allow us to act on it. So on one hand, if we didn't do any drug enforcement work, you'd have a 0 figure. it would show there's no drug supply in Inverclyde, which we all know is false and utter nonsense. But because we're actually out there doing our job with support for all yourselves and the partner and the public, it's the level of enforcement work is the take-home message. I think it shows exactly how robust the response is in Inverclyde. And I've said this from my first day here, and I'll say it to my last. Drug enforcement is always going to be top of the priorities here, because it links into almost every other crime type that we discuss in this forum. But I think the point you made was very well put, and I appreciate you saying that. It does show that the drug enforcement message is getting across. So thank you for that.
Okay, John.
Yes, that's lovely. That's a very reassuring response. Thank you.
Paul.
Thank you, Kabir. This question might be you, Chief Inspector, to answer, you Superintendent. But back when I last substituted, I was in November, and the Divisional Commander, Chief Superintendent Waddle, was here. And I raised concerns about the type of data that's reported in these reports, where you compare it to the level that fire service can do, where you can distill it down to ward level. Now, back then, the Chief Superintendent had said that you were implementing a new data collection system in the west of Scotland earlier this year. So we're now about 6 months on. So where's the data?
I hope I can cover that question, Councillor. So we're not there yet, it's the truth. We're still working on trying to get the data more available. So if you imagine monthly in this area, you have community council meetings, you have this forum, you have a variety of different forums who seek data along with context. There's no point in us giving the data if it's wrong. We're still working on this problem, but what I have is we ask the question, do we have publicly available data that we can give to the public themselves, raw data that they can filter down? We do have, so it's kind of hard to read this out in full, but I can certainly email you this after the meeting. We do have crime and offence data that's down to multi-member ward level, available through the Scotland webpage, and it's under how we do it crime data. There's also stop service data, because that's often linked to the context of the police response, and that's literally the same page. How do we do it? Stop service data publication. And some other data I think the board would look for before was road traffic data. Again, we can have that. However, I think the point is, can we filter this down more in this document? If I'm reading your question right, we're not quite there yet. Our IT systems are being changed over, but they're not complete yet. We've looked at amalgamating data between ourselves and Inverclyde Council, and there's a number of challenges in terms of information sharing. You're right, as long as we don't have the data available to you as yet, still a work in progress. Hope that covers it. Hope that helps.
Yeah, yes, thanks.
Are you okay with that, Councillor Cassidy?
Yeah, the question is
All right, yes.
So there's towards you, Chief Inspector, you'll be aware there's ongoing issues with antisocial behaviour in Inverkip Beach now for a number of years, and that has been my ward. There's a recent meeting of residents in the arena, and there was a growing frustration from them about Police Scotland's inability to get to grips with the problem. And a number expressed that they have now no confidence in the police's abilities. And a number of weeks ago, there was the School Leavers Weekend, and there was a multi-agency approach taken in Inverkip Beach, tied in with the Council's Warden Service, the Assist Team, BTP, ScotRail and Police Scotland. And I happened to be out to see the action that was taking place, and I have to say that, well, I absolutely praise the approach taken by our Warden Service and Assist Team, who done spectacular work, and BTP and ScotRail, who done good work. What I did notice was that Police Scotland were barely visible. And indeed, one of my big concerns was at the end of the night, when it came time to getting the kids back up to the train station, back on the trains to get home safely, police officers disappeared off the scene and left the Council's Warden Service to deal with the kids. So my question to you, Chief Inspector, is what are you going to do to restore the faith of the residents in Inverkip and get to grips with this problem?
Well, Chief Inspector.
Thanks, Councillor. Good question. So first and foremost, you've identified part of my answer. We do have a multi-agency plan in place. It's been in place for some time. Truth, frankly, we can't be everywhere at once. So if the officers are called away, I can't give accounts for a night, weeks and weeks later. If it's raised at the time, I can give a more coordinated response. If I knew the times and dates, I could probably look into why the cops are called away. Suffice to say, some of the stats we've discussed here have had significant, serious violent crime, and the police have had to be called away from lower level, and I'm not saying non-problematic, lower level antisocial behaviour. So I have a limited pool of resource, have a multitude of areas to cover, a very massive land area, and have to put those resources where they're most needed or assessed to be needed at that time. I think if the periods you're talking about, we do have a plan in place. If the cops have been abstracted from that, I do apologise, and it's unfortunate. However, they have my support. They've had to be called away to something more pressing, whether it's ongoing domestic violence, knife carrying, some of the attempted murders, some of the major incidents we've had. I won't apologise for that, because that's correct, and I'd expect my supervisors on the ground to quite correctly corral their cops and move them to something that's got more threat to life, and threat, if you understand what I mean. But I do get the ongoing frustrations. We've been working in Inverkirk Beach for a number of months now. We actually started working that way before the Easter holidays. The multi-agency approach that you referenced was actually pulled together and coordinated initially by the police, by my community policing inspector, and with great support from the wardens, as you say. Totally agree. British Transport Police, I think we covered this in one of the last forums actually. Yeah. We were caught unawares, because usually this is something that will start towards after the Easter holidays into the summer, and it did start earlier. Even the residents were telling us they didn't expect this issue to arise. But to give you a bit of reassurance, there's still a plan in place, and it's ongoing. It'll be resourced as best I can, given other demands. And you'll be aware, as I'm sure the whole board are, we're not exactly flush with officers. We've had other demands on us, and we've had certain cuts to finances and posts. But despite that, we've brought in other cops in our areas. Over the last 4 weeks, we've had really good support from a number of neighbouring divisions, national teams. We've had cops from places like Glasgow, Dunbartonshire, further afield. That in itself has allowed us, the cops you're referring to, if, in truth, we probably wouldn't have had those cops there at all in the weekends you're talking about, being frank with you, were it not for the fact we could support from other divisions who allowed us to move away from some of the other serious violence demands, because other cops were covering that. But we are trying our best, and I appreciate there's no easy fix. The other point I would make is we're not going to be in the business of criminalising children. Some of the issues being reported, there are issues in Inverkirk Beach. We haven't fully resolved it. It's a work in progress. Some of the issues are going to be legacy issues that we're going to struggle to fix at any point in time. But we are not going to go down and start locking up children. We'll try to take a reasoned, proportionate response to what's going on. Some of the issues that have been reported have been made worse by intervention of members of the public, and that's something we've actively tried to discourage, because some of the reports that have been made, we've investigated and haven't been evidenced. And unfortunately, for reasons I understand, a lot of people are reluctant to come forward and phone the police about an issue, but they're really reluctant to give statements and evidence. And unfortunately, in the absence of that, we can't police dozens of kids. We can't do anything with them, basically, if we're not breaking the law. We can encourage people, we can send parental letters through the council, and they do that on our behalf. We gather details where children are not committing crimes, but there are concerns. Our council colleagues will send parental letters. We have national processes for reporting to social work, where we have concerns about use of drink and drugs. But generally, the feedback I'm getting from my cops who are attending this every week is that most of the kids, and the vast majority, are not breaking the law, but we do understand the fear of the community there. It's more down to the numbers of people. And the final point I'm making this is, we actually went into the realms of speaking to the local authority. About half of the land that the kids are on is actually private, so we're actually engaging with private landowners to see if we can get support from them as well. So I'm genuinely apologetic if the community are losing faith. I'd like to think this will give a bit of reassurance as to how committed we are to fix it. But without the details being made known to me at the time, I can't really give comment in this forum. I wasn't expecting to get a question about that specific night. I'm happy to communicate, obviously, after this board. If there's any more specifics I can give you, and I will get you an answer. Hope that covers it. Thank you.
Ruth Binks?
Yeah, just to reinforce Chief Inspector Kane's answer there, there is a strong partnership working, and just because there is not a physical presence doesn't mean that the work hasn't been taken ahead of time, and also to look at the different areas where young people may congregate. And as Damien has said, it's not always about criminality, it's about keeping the young people safe as well. So just to reinforce that there is a strong partnership working, regular meetings with youth teams as well as the community wardens, and alerting parents to what's happening. But was always reactions, and certainly trying to look at prevention rather than criminalising them.
Thank you, Ruth. Councillor Daisley.
Just to make everyone aware with this issue, there's a meeting at Inverclyde Hub next Friday, I believe, at 7 PM, which will be an information sharing session with relevant stakeholders being there for residents to come along and get involved and understand how they can help to support this issue and do it from their side. So just to make everybody aware of that.
Who's meeting, James?
It's the Inverkit pub next Friday.
The pub?
Hub, sorry,
Pub,
the
right.
community centre.
I'm not coming.
I'll go back to the pub.
You got me interested for 5 seconds. Thank you. Councillor Maguire, your hand is up. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. I need to apologise. First of all, I had WebEx issues at the beginning of this agenda item, so apologies if these questions have been answered. I've got 3 questions. I'll keep them short. The first one's around sexual crimes. Looking at the stats that are here, it would appear that there's somewhere between 67, 68 people that have been assaulted and reported this within the past year that haven't been a victim of historic sexual abuse. I was just wondering if there's any particular pattern with that. Is there any particular interventions that are being done around that?
I think the 2 officers, the Chief Superintendent and the Sergeant, have both left now. We took that agenda item first to allow them to get back to their headquarters.
All right, that's okay. I maybe just missed that then.
Yes, I think you just did. Lorna, do you want to attempt that?
Can do, convener, thank you. So yeah,
Apologies.
there's a number of interventions and kind of safeguarding processes that we've got in place. In relation to those specific crimes that you're asking about, if there's any commonality between them, you would really have to go back and dig down into figures a bit further to see if there's any specific link. I suppose, are you kind of questioning whether they've happened indoors, outdoors, whether it's been strangers or persons known to the victim? Is that kind of the information you're looking for there?
It's more so, it's to do with page 6 of our report, and it's more so to do with the fact that there seems to be, out of all the numbers of sexual crimes reported, historically it's been historical sexual crimes that we've had reported on, but at the moment over half, 57%, is current sexual crimes that have been committed recently. So it's just to see if there's any particular risk areas, risk factors, is there anything in particular? I think we need to be doing as much as we can to protect people that have been made vulnerable through these crimes, but also to try and protect any future people who potentially may find themselves in those situations, because it is a very serious crime. It's one of the most abhorrent crimes that can be committed against somebody.
I think detail of that might have been better answered by the Chief
That's okay.
Superintendent.
I'll take it offline.
Natasha.
That's okay.
I'm sure you could take it up offline.
What I would say,
That's okay. I'll take that up offline.
What I would say, just to give you some reassurance, is that if there's any forensic opportunity in terms of investigating a sexual crime, then it's absolutely taken. And we do work particularly hard to identify the offenders in any sexual crime. I fully agree with you there in terms of the impact that being a victim of sexual crime can have on a victim. So yeah, it's something that we do exploit every opportunity to try and identify the offender successfully. And put as many safeguarding and welfare support in place for the victim as possible.
Yeah, no, that's okay. I appreciate that. I need to apologise. The reason why I didn't ask it and when we were getting the presentation was because I heard the presentation. I just thought because it was to do with the current stats that was more appropriate here. I've got 2 more questions. I'll do 2 of them together because they're a bit shorter. So the first one is just around missing persons. I can see that according to this report, we've got around 65 to 67 people under 20 who have went missing within this reporting period. That's once again another large increase. Is there any further work being done in schools, with families and colleges and social media to try to reduce the risk factors in these numbers? And my final question, you'll be glad to hear, is around the lock zone. So it's great to hear that officers have been getting trained in this. Have there been any instances of this life-saving drug actually being used on duty?
Thanks, Councillor. I'll take your second question first. No, we've not used it recently here. It's been used, I think the last time we counted nationally, it's been used during the pilot over 100 times. It's difficult to determine if every time saved a life, but there was some clear case studies nationally when it was used in the pilot that there was life saved by it because the police were on scene quite quickly. And we use a intranasal spray. I think it was miscommunication before we thought we had syringes going around. It has saved lives. I'm not aware of any locally, but it's one I'm keen to record and I'll put out quite publicly if we do have any on the social media. Back to your first question, the missing people. The figures are quite stark. Believe it or not, from the last few meetings, the figures have actually improved. The one thing you'll see in the middle of it's page 6, is that a common theme is the missing people. Each have their own independent investigation, each have their own factors and risk factors, but one common denominator is it's generally the top 3, 4 or 5 people, who in this case are all juveniles, are all young people under 18. They make up a significant proportion. That's quite commonplace. So in general terms, I think your question was, what do we do to prevent people going missing? We've discussed some of the national safeguarding methods we have, sharing information with the council. There is inputs through education at the schools on all manner of business. But these top 3, 4 and 5 people who go missing, these are generally people that have had enhanced safeguarding put in place. So by that I mean pretty much every measure that collectively the partnerships and the police can put in place has been offered, and there are reasons why that young person is choosing not to adhere. There are missing reports. The second thing is, part of the safeguarding is we actively encourage missing person reports. So there is a tolerance level between parents and care establishments of when to report a person missing. There's a certain tolerance of risk, but we're always quite clear if you have concerns about drug misuse, CSE, child sexual exploitation, phone the police. So I would actually turn it around and say most of these missing reports relate to young people. Some of them relate to, and as you say, unfortunately, there's a small percentage of these people have been deceased upon recovery, which is particularly sad. But to give you that reassurance, we do a risk assessment of each individual. Part of our return strategy is when we find a missing person, particularly a young person, we interview them, we ask them questions about why they left, what can we do to put them in place, have they been victim of crime or involved in any crime, and we then try and assess that on its own merits. We share information with partners, care units, parents, social work. We have a view to trying to mitigate the risk, but the truth is a significant number of these people have their own issues that, despite the intervention from us and other partners, they're likely to continue going missing. But what we do now, and again we've circulated today, is something called the Philomena protocol. And I'm not sure if you maybe heard me mention this at a previous board, but in essence it's based on a very simplistic form that is given to care establishments in any area where a young person might go missing. It's pre-populating their full description, their clothing, their height, their mobile phone number, social, etc. Tools that we can use to then find that young person quickly. And that's something that's been shared again this week.
The Philomena protocol, yeah.
That's great. Thank you very much for answering our questions. Thanks, Convener.
Okay, thanks, Natasha. Councillor Quinn.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. You'll be glad to know I've not got a specific question. I think we've had rich debate on a number of the individual items. I've just got a sort of general question around detection rates. So when I read the report, there's quite a few. I mean, obviously every part of the report you've got a detection rate, and it tells us on the sort of year-to-date figure whether it's increased or decreased. But I have no concept of if that's a good detection rate or if it's a poor detection rate. So a number of our other committees or sometimes our other reports, we have maybe a Scottish average potentially. So if you look at for instance, if you look at page 5, under the hate crime, it says the detection rate is 78.7%. Which seems reasonable, and then under the disorder and antisocial behaviour it shows 27.7%, which looks low, but I have no concept of that's actually, it's always low for every area. So I just thought I'd put it out there and see if there's a solution can be found to that to give us a kind of reassurance.
No, I think that's an excellent question. Who's taking it? Lorna, Damien? You letting the boss take it?
I'll cover that, Convener. Basically, the main reason is our analysts will use local data because the purpose of this board and this forum is to do with local scrutiny. So we find that it's more beneficial to give you a reference point that's local. So if we used a national figure, we've been including Highlands and Islands and rural areas, urban areas. It wouldn't like paint the picture. The whole point, I think, the whole point in the figures we try and put forward to ourselves is about localism. But you're right. So different crimes are generally going to have different detection rates. So I'll give you an example. We were in the papers a number of years ago, front page story about detection rates for housebreaking. And I think if I remember right, the figures were really appeared very low, 15–20%. So the story was 4 out of 5 house breakings undetected. But the point of these forums are that we can deliver context. So the context for that story many years ago was most of the house breakings recorded were actually sheds that had been broken into between the end of the summer when people got lawnmowers away and the start of the spring or whatever, months later. So it was almost, even Sherlock Holmes could never solve these crimes. So detection rates were very, very low. But you're right to point out, so different crime types are going to have their own difficulties. Mark, as you probably picked up, he's detective superintendent now for CID and PPU, but until very recently he was a DCI in PPU covering rape teams. So depending on the type of crime under investigation under the different headings, they're going to have their own peculiarities. For example, one of the big difficulties we've had in Scotland with rape is the fact that it's often uncorroborated. There are no other civilian witnesses present, whereas that's when we have house breakings, we always have a scenario where there's no witnesses at all, we have to rely on forensics and CCTV. And then you have other types of crimes where you have hate crime, where generally speaking, we get these reports because the victim is competent enough to report to us. And generally speaking, we tend to find with hate crimes, we'll get more support from the general public to offer evidence forward. So my point is, different crime types have their own challenges, and I totally take your point. We could certainly amend what we put in the report between the convener and Chief Superintendent Waddell. My recommendation is, but you might lose some of the localism if we were to give you sort of national detection rates. I think we've tried to bring in the figures comparing last year's data to this year's to try and make it more transparent and accurate, because frankly we could easily have claimed a lot of wins using the 5-year average because not much happened during the lockdown, but we've chosen to be more transparent. That would be my recommendation, but I'm happy to be led by yourselves.
Yeah, the recommendation from Chief Superintendent Laura Waddell was for us to use interplied figures on a month-to-month basis and do a comparison that way, which I'm personally quite comfortable with, but I'm happy to take direction from the committee.
Yeah, so the issue that I've got is when I look at disorder and antisocial behaviour from a scrutiny point of view, I don't know if I should be concerned that it's 27.7. I should be happy that it's increased, but I still don't know if I should be concerned. You know, so if another area which is comparable to Inverclyde has got a detection rate of 50%, then I would be concerned. Yeah, but if it's similar, then I won't be concerned. So what I'm saying is the detection rate, purely just looking at ourselves, doesn't actually give me any confidence, you know, because they're so varied, whether it's good or not. I know it's good if it increases, but I don't know how it compares if Inverclyde are having a lower detection rate than other areas.
Lorna?
Thanks, convener. Yeah, Councillor, I suppose that the kind of issue with this trying to compare it with other areas of the country, and then you're saying other similar areas to Inverclyde, is how do we actually determine how similar that area is to Inverclyde? You know, it would be really difficult, and my fear would be that any kind of a benefit in that comparison would be lost because we might not be comparing like for like, and actually we wouldn't get much benefit out of actually doing that comparison. So it might not necessarily show any particular pattern or national average, if you like, because areas are so different across the country that you'd be struggling to make a comparison between the likes of Inverclyde and Western Bartonshire, for example, or Inverclyde and Eastern Bartonshire. You know, so those areas do differ so much in terms of demographic, crime stats, and patterns. So I would worry that we might lose the benefit of what you're trying to achieve there, albeit we do take it on board. I think it's something we could maybe take back and speak to the analysts locally about and see if there's anything we can do around about that. But I think from the point of view the convener made, that the Chief Superintendent is keen that we continue to analyse local figures. I think it's more meaningful for this board than starting to bring in figures from across the country.
Thank you, Lorna. I'll have a word offline, Lynn, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's great, thanks.
Any other questions? Well, we got our money's worth out of you two today, didn't we? Thank you very much, Damien. Thank you, Lorna. That is excellent. We now move on to fire and rescue. Now, we've had David and Paul waiting all this time. Who is going to do the report, please?
Convener, I'll just bring Paul in a second. Just a very quick brief apologies to committee members. We had a very short notice meeting put in the diary with some of our principal officers immediately following scrutiny, hence we would have been in person. So apologies for that, and without further ado, I will bring Paul in. Thanks, Convener.
Thank you, David. Paul, you're the group commander. Welcome.
Thank you, Convener, and hopefully everybody can hear me okay.
Yes.
I'm aware that the committee members have had the report in advance, therefore I'm not going to intend to go through it line by line, but what I will do is I'll pick out some highlights. But I'm happy to take any questions following that. So firstly, we'll look at accidental dwelling fires, and it's noted that there's been an increase in the number of fires compared to this time last year. However, there has been a 25% decrease from last quarter, which is good. Information on our activity is shared with our partners at Inverclyde Hub meetings to assist with preventative and educational activity. The operational crews will carry out a post-domestic response at all incidents and provide safety advice to all occupants. It is pleasing to note that detection was present in all the properties that were affected and that it raised the alarm in 90% of those occasions. The operational crews have carried out 49 post-domestic incident responses following incidents and 141 home fire safety visits, which 60 of these were classed as high risk. We'll then move on to accidental dwelling fire casualties. The one incident that's reported in the paper was a halogen lamp that had fallen over. The 51-year-old occupant suffered from minor burns and attended hospital for treatment. An update on those figures, and I'll tell you in a minute the reason why they're not showing, but there is an increase of 4 casualties which are from one incident. And the reason for that is there is a joint investigation ongoing with that incident, and that's why it hasn't shown up in the report. We will continue the prevention and educational activity and thematic plans to try and reduce this number further. We'll now move on to unintentional injury and harm. It's pleasing to note the reduction in numbers of casualties due to unintentional harm, although a significant amount of these are still attributed to road traffic collisions. Our Community Action Team Road Safety Champion continues to work with partners to focus on education and prevention. And as the summer approaches, we will also focus on water safety awareness engagement sessions. We'll now look at deliberate fire setting. Although there's been a decrease in deliberate fire setting this reporting period, almost a third of the incidents are grassland fires. Some of this is attributed to seasonal variations in respect of deliberate secondary fires. But focusing on this activity, we are continuing to work closely with Inverclyde Hub on reduction strategies. We'll now move on to non-domestic fire safety. A welcome downward trend continues with non-domestic fire incidents. Where incidents are occurring, the severity is low. Our team of protection officers provide legislative support to duty holders to assist them in meeting their obligations as duty holders. And finally, we'll just talk about UFAS. There has been a slight increase in UFAS incidents, or unwanted fire alarm signals, compared to this time last year. However, there has been a decrease from the last quarter. But as we move towards the implementation of a new approach to UFAS on the 1st of July, as reported to committee recently, we anticipate a significant reduction on these calls, which will provide valuable daytime capacity for additional focus on firefighter and community safety activities. And just a bit of additional information, our spring tactical action plan will focus on wildfires and deliberate fire setting. This again is where our excellent partnership pays dividends. Our community action team have been working with local schools to deliver engagement sessions to the pupils. And I'm happy to take any questions from committee members.
Well, thank you very much. Councillor Daisley.
Thanks, Convener. I just want to ask a question about deliberate fire setting. So if you look at page 20, it looks like a quarter, 25%, 11 instances were in Inverclyde South West. Now I noticed you mentioned about grassland areas and stuff like that. It was my assumption, based upon recent committees, that there was no significant issues, or there were no significant issues across the cut and branching type areas where there had been in previous years. So can you, first of all, can you clarify if that's true or not? And secondly, are there, what kind of challenge areas are there now in Inverclyde South West that we need to be aware of? Thanks.
Thank you. Group Commander or David?
Yeah, I'm quite happy to answer that one. I'm not sure if I would want to look at specific areas at committee, but what I'm happy to do, our community action team have detailed statistics that they share at the hub meetings 3 times a week. And if it's to the councillors' agreement, I'll be happy to provide those statistics off table.
That would be great, thank you.
Yeah, if you could supply them to Councillor Paisley, please.
I'll get them prepared through the council officers convener, not a problem.
Thank you. Any other questions? No? No? I think the members are questioned out, gentlemen. I now move on. Thank you very much for coming along. I move on to agenda item number 5, new business, local police and fire scrutiny panel update report. Mr. Hugh Scott.
Thank you very much, Convener. This is an update of the national and local scrutiny boards events going on from the relevant parties. In the report, the report has already been sent out to you, so I'm just going to highlight a number of things across the report for yourselves. Under the Scottish Police Authority report, there's a number of things that's happened since and was discussed at the meeting on the 23rd of February 2023. Just bring up to your attention, 3.4 is the me campaign that we've already had a briefing on. We're working very closely with our colleagues in Police Scotland around that, and we'll continue to do that across the authority and take that forward. In the report, you'll see that there's under a number of things, the violence against strategy for Police Scotland. We will endorse that by taking our own violence against policy to the Alliance Board on the 19th of June, and that gives an update on what we as a local authority and partners are doing around domestic abuse, and we'll see that on the Alliance Board. 5.1, you'll see there's a local agreement now being with Clogher and Police Scotland and Police Authority, SPA, and you can see that they've agreed a strategy going forward 22 to 27. And on that, it's 4 outcomes that they'll be looking at, and we'll be looking at local scrutiny and accountability, prevent and early intervention, health and wellbeing, and there's also more details of that in the coming months. Under the local police plans and framework for scrutiny, it was asked at the last panel for us to go away and look at getting more information around elected member briefings, and included within the paper is a number of scrutiny updates and paper to do that. Officers are also working with Clogher and SPA to look at some training for scrutiny members, and that will probably be after later on in the year, but we are engaged with that as requested. And finally, on the paper is just the feedback from on the 23rd of February from the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service Board. Again, relevant information there for you to read. I'm happy to take any questions on the report.
Thank you very much, Hugh. Any questions for Hugh? Councillor Moran.
Can I start off with thank you for, I downloaded all the stuff and I've got what I said before that. But with my limited experience in IT, I used my computer driving licence and on it, and I found all that stuff. And it wasn't easy for us doing it. So I want to apologise to you. Maybe I never tried hard enough to find it with Clogher, but it's 2 really good documents, I have to say. And I'll be keeping them here beside my other documents, which I can refer to when I have to come along to a board meeting. I think it's something that we should have had right from the start, part of our training, with council training, we've never achieved, especially for the new members who find it a bit of a minefield anyway. So if there's a couple of these documents, they're a lot easier for us to understand our roles and duties and questions to ask. So I'll start off by saying thank you here and apologising, because I've had this personally a bit longer and I've probably got it myself. But anyway, everybody's got this now, so thank you.
Councillor Moran is very conscientious. I must congratulate you. You've given the rest of us a showing up, but that's okay. Any questions for Hugh? I've got some questions, but I'll take them offline, Hugh. Well, listen, thank you very much, everybody, for coming. Thank you to Lorna and Damien. Thank you to the two senior fire officers along today. And thank you, colleagues, for attending. And thank you, officers. The meeting is now closed. Thank you.